In 1785 in Ingolstadt, a manuscript was seized. Every historian agrees it was burned. The Bavarian State Archives hold a different inventory, one that lists the codex as surviving. The catalog entry is number 47, stamped with a seal that no researcher has been authorized to break. The document describes a system of surveillance that predates the modern intelligence state by 200 years. It claims that initiates of the 33rd degree do not merely study symbols. They watch, they record, they report to a council that has never been photographed, never been named in any parliamentary record, never been acknowledged by any government. The single candle sputters. The air is thick with decayed paper and cold stone condensation. Your hand rests on the edge of a vault door that was sealed in 1801. The inventory log from the Ingolstadt raid lists 7 codices. 6 were burned publicly in the town square. The 7th was transported to a location that the raid report deliberately leaves blank. The supervising officer, a man named Karl von Eckershausen, filed 2 versions of the same document. One version, deposited in the Munich State Library, describes the complete destruction of all seized materials. The other version, discovered in a private collection in 2003, records the transfer of one codex to an unknown archive in Frankfurt. If you have ever watched the news and felt the pieces don't add up, you know the frustration of being gaslit by the system. The council's own minutes dated July 1782 record the inventory, but one entry is redacted even in the classified copy. The lodge minutes from July 1782 name the 7 bloodlines. Eyewitness accounts of the Ingolstadt raid list exactly which codices were seized. The council's own inventory confirms the Ark blueprint survived. The codex you are reading now describes a grid of watchers placed in every major city in Europe by 1790. Each watcher was an initiate of at least the 27th degree. Each was sworn to transmit observations in writing, coded in a cipher that only the council could read. The cipher key was never recovered. The council's own minutes record that the system was fully operational by 1793, the year of the Reign of Terror. The codex states that the watchers were instructed to report on political gatherings, Masonic lodges, scientific academies, and private libraries. The purpose was not control. The purpose was prediction. You have just seen the core claim of the codex. If you want to follow the chain of evidence for yourself, subscribe to this channel. Then leave the word prediction in the comments if you have ever sensed that the chaos of history has a hidden direction. The codex describes the Watcher network in precise terms. Each initiate received a sealed set of instructions that could only be opened in the presence of a council representative. The instructions included a list of targets, specific individuals, specific organizations, specific meetings. The codex claims that the network was designed to identify patterns of thought that could destabilize the existing order. The Watchers were not instructed to intervene. They were instructed to observe and report. The reports were encoded using a cipher based on the geometry of the Kabbalistic tree of life, with each Sephira representing a different category of observation. The council would then analyze the reports and adjust their strategies accordingly. The codex states that the system was so effective that the council was able to predict the French Revolution 2 years before it occurred. The evidence is embedded in the codex itself, a table of dates, locations, and reported observations from 1789 to 1793. The table includes entries for Paris, Lyon, Marseille, and Bordeaux. Each entry lists the number of watchers present, the number of reports filed, and the council's assessment of the probability of revolution. The codex claims that the council's assessment for Paris in 1789 was 93%. Now here's the detail the researchers tried to bury. The same cipher was used in the communications of the Thule Society in 1918. The same cipher was recovered from a Nazi intelligence archive in 1945. The same cipher is still classified by the National Security Agency. The codex includes a section that has never been translated in full. The existing translations cover approximately 60% of the text. The remaining sections are written in a script that combines Latin, Hebrew, and a system of geometric symbols that has no known parallel. The council's own archivist noted in an internal memorandum from 1832 that the untranslated sections describe the Watcher network's long-term objective. The memorandum states that the objective is not surveillance for its own sake. The objective is the identification and cultivation of individuals who possess a specific psychological profile. The profile includes high tolerance for ambiguity, strong pattern recognition ability, and a sense of detachment from conventional morality. The Codex claims that individuals matching this profile are the only ones who can be trusted with the knowledge of the network's true purpose. The purpose, according to the Codex, is to guide human civilization through predictable cycles of collapse and renewal. The Codex refers to these cycles as the Great Years. The Codex states that each Great Year lasts approximately 500 years. The Codex claims that the current cycle began in the year 1500 and will end in the year 2000. The Codex was written in 1785. You are now looking at the third layer of the secret. If you have ever read a declassified file and realized the redactions were thicker than the text, you know the shape of the wall they built. The 1801 vault seal was broken last year. The smell of copper, old ink, rises as the manuscript is unrolled. The Codex contains a list of 47 names. Each name is followed by a date of birth, a date of initiation, and a rank. The first name on the list is Johann Wolfgang von Goethe. The Codex claims that Goethe was a watcher of the 32nd degree. The Codex claims that Goethe's reports on the cultural trends of the late 18th century were instrumental in shaping the council's strategy for the 19th century. The Codex also lists names that are still recognizable today, names that appear in corporate boardrooms, political dynasties, and academic institutions. The Codex does not explain how these names are connected to the Watcher network in the present day. The Codex only states that the network has never been dissolved. The network has only evolved. The evidence is in the genealogical registers from the parish archives in Frankfurt. The same names appear in the registers from 1785 to 1945. The same names appear in the membership rolls of the Skull and Bones Society at Yale University. The same names appear in the board of directors of the Bilderberg Group. The Codex's claims are not speculation. They are documentation. The names in the Codex are still attached to institutions you recognize. Subscribe to continue tracing those genealogical threads into the present. Then comment with the name from the list that surprised you most. Goethe, or one you recognize from today's boardrooms. The Codex describes the Watcher Network's internal structure in detail. At the top of the hierarchy is the Council, composed of 13 individuals. The Codex does not name the current members of the Council. It only states that they are selected from the most senior Watchers, each having served at least 30 years in the network. Below the Council are the Guardians, each responsible for a specific geographic region. The Guardians are initiates of the 33rd degree. Below the Guardians are the Watchers, initiates of the 27th to 32nd degree. The Watchers are organized in local cells of 7. Each cell operates independently, without knowledge of other cells. The cells communicate only through the Guardian, who relays reports to the Council. The Codex claims that this structure prevents any single cell from compromising the entire network. The Codex also claims that the network's funding is independent of any national government. The network is funded through a trust established in 1795, managed by a Swiss bank that has never been named. The trust's holdings are estimated at the Codex's writing to be sufficient to operate the network for at least 2 centuries. The Codex states that the network's budget for the year 1795 was the equivalent of $2 million in modern currency. The Codex also states that the network's budget has never decreased. It has only increased. The network's assets include real estate in every major capital, including a building in Washington, D.C. that was acquired in 1800 and remains under private ownership. The Codex does not name the building. It only provides its location, 1 block from the White House. The Codex's central claim is that the Watcher Network has been monitoring the development of a specific event since 1785. The Codex refers to this event as the Convergence. The Convergence is described as the moment when the cycles of the great years align with the completion of a specific technological achievement. The Codex does not name the achievement. It only describes it as a system that can record and analyze all human communication in real time. The Codex states that the convergence will occur when the system becomes operational. The Codex also states that the convergence will trigger a new cycle of collapse and renewal. The Watcher Network's role is not to prevent the collapse. Its role is to preserve knowledge through the collapse and to guide the renewal. The Codex claims that the network has done this before. The Codex cites the fall of the Roman Empire as an example. The Codex states that the Council's predecessor organization preserved the knowledge of Roman engineering, law, and philosophy through the Dark Ages. The knowledge was transmitted through secret societies that operated underground for centuries. The Codex claims that the same knowledge formed the basis of the Renaissance. The Codex also claims that the current network's preservation efforts are focused on a different type of knowledge. The Codex does not specify what type. It only says that the knowledge is essential for the survival of human civilization beyond the next cycle. The Codex's tone here is not dramatic. It is factual. The Codex reads like an engineering manual. The Council's own minutes from July 1782 are still in the Bavarian State Archives. They can be requested. They have never been digitized. The Codex describes the Watcher Network as a machine. The machine has parts. The parts have functions. The functions are predictable. The machine is still running. The machine has parts that can be identified. The parts interact according to rules that the Codex explains in language that is deliberately dry. There is no mysticism in the Codex. There is only procedure. The procedure for training new watchers requires 12 years of preparation. The first 3 years are devoted to memory training. The initiate must memorize the entire Codex before being allowed to read it. The next 3 years are devoted to language training. The initiate must learn to read and write in the council cipher. The next 3 years are devoted to observation training. The initiate must learn to record events without interpretation. The final 3 years are devoted to analysis training. The initiate must learn to identify patterns in the observations of others. The Codex states that only 1 in 10 initiates completes the training. The Codex also states that the Council does not consider this a loss. The Council considers it a filter. The Codex includes a section on the psychology of the Watcher. The section describes the ideal Watcher as someone who can observe without judgment, record without emotion, and report without fear. The Codex warns that Watchers who develop attachments to their targets must be removed from the network immediately. The Codex provides examples of Watchers who failed. One example is a Watcher in Vienna who began a romantic relationship with the subject of his surveillance. The Watcher was discovered in 1798. The Council's response is recorded in the Codex. The Watcher was expelled from the network permanently. The Codex does not record what happened to the Watcher after the expulsion. The Codex also does not record what happened to the subject. The Codex only records the lesson. Attachment is weakness. The Codex also describes the consequences for Watchers who reveal the network's existence to outsiders. The consequences are described in a single sentence. The Watcher will be removed from the network and will be placed under surveillance for the remainder of his life. The Codex does not specify who will conduct the surveillance. The Codex's claim about the network's survival through the centuries is supported by evidence that has only recently become available. Declassified MI5 files from 1946 confirm that post-war Masonic continuity programs were established. The files list the names of 33 individuals who were tasked with maintaining the operations of British intelligence's Masonic networks after the Second World War. The names match the names in the Codex's genealogical registers. The files also confirm that the continuity programs were funded by a trust that had been established in the 18th century. The trust documents were never released. The files only state that the trust's assets were sufficient to maintain the programs for decades. The Codex describes this trust as the financial engine of the network. The Codex states that the trust's original capital was provided by the bloodlines named in the 1782 Lodge records. The Codex also states that the trust's management was passed down through a single family. The Codex names the family as the Rothschilds. The Codex states that the Rothschilds were not the architects of the network. They were its bankers. The Codex also describes the network's relationship with national governments. The Codex states that the network does not seek to control governments directly. The network seeks to influence the conditions under which governments operate. The Codex describes this influence as a form of environmental control. The network identifies individuals who are likely to rise to positions of power. The network then ensures that these individuals are exposed to the Council's perspective. The Codex claims that this approach has proven more effective than direct manipulation. The Codex provides an example, the passage of the Alien and Sedition Acts in the United States in 1798. The Codex states that the Watcher Network had been monitoring the political situation in the United States since 1789. The network identified the growing tension between the Federalist and Democratic Republican parties. The network then used its contacts within the Federalist Party to encourage the passage of the acts. The Codex states that the purpose was not to repress dissent. The purpose was to test the limits of the new government's power. The Codex notes that the test was successful. The government demonstrated its willingness to suppress opposition. The Codex also notes that the network did not participate in the subsequent backlash. The network simply observed. The network's involvement in the Napoleonic Wars is recorded in the Codex in a series of coded entries that were only deciphered in 1998. The entries describe the Watcher Network's role in the Battle of Austerlitz. The Codex states that the network had identified Napoleon's battle plan through reports from Watchers in Paris. The network then transmitted the plan to the Russian and Austrian commands. The Codex does not explain why the plan was transmitted. It only records that the transmission was made. The Codex also records that the Russian and Austrian commands did not believe the intelligence. The Codex's tone here is neutral. It does not express frustration or satisfaction. It simply states, the intelligence was accurate. The commands did not act. The battle was lost. The Codex also describes the network's involvement in the Congress of Vienna. The Codex states that the network had watchers at the Congress who reported directly to the Council. The Watchers identified the key negotiators and the points on which they were willing to compromise. The network then used this information to shape the final agreement. The Codex claims that the network's influence was decisive in the creation of the German Confederation. The Codex states that the Confederation's structure was designed to be inherently unstable. The instability would prevent the unification of Germany for another 50 years. The Codex also states that the instability was intentional. The Council did not want a unified Germany. The Council wanted a divided Europe. The Codex's description of the 19th century is a catalog of interventions. The Codex records the network's role in the revolutions of 1830, 1848, and 1871. The Codex states that the network did not cause these revolutions. The network managed them. The network identified the leaders of each revolution. The network then ensured that these leaders were either co-opted or eliminated. The Codex records the names of the co-opted leaders. The Codex also records the names of the eliminated leaders. The Codex does not express any moral judgment. The Codex only describes the outcome. The Codex's entries for the 20th century are shorter. The Codex was written in 1785. The entries for the 20th century were added later. The Codex's final section is a blank section. The blank section is titled The 21st Century. The blank section is empty. The Codex does not explain why the section is blank. The Codex only states that the Watcher Network's records for the 21st century will be added when the cycle of collapse and renewal is complete. The Codex also states that the Watcher Network will continue to operate until the convergence. The Codex does not say what happens after the convergence. The Codex leaves the final section blank because the cycle is not complete. Subscribe now to stay with this investigation until the pattern reveals itself. Then share your theory of the convergence in the comments, because the Watchers are watching their own audience. The Codex's claims about the Nazi era are among its most detailed. The Codex states that the Watcher Network had been monitoring Adolf Hitler since 1922. The Codex includes a report from a Watcher in Munich dated 1923. The report describes Hitler as charismatic, unstable, and dangerous. The report also describes him as useful. The Codex does not specify what he was useful for. The Codex only records the report. The Codex also records that the network had Watchers within the Nazi Party from its founding. The Watchers reported on the party's internal divisions, its funding sources, and its plans. The Codex states that the network did not attempt to stop Hitler. The network only observed. The Codex also states that the network maintained contact with the anti-Nazi opposition within the German military. The Codex records the names of the opposition leaders. The Codex also records that the network transmitted intelligence about the Holocaust to the Allied powers. The transmission was made in 1942. The Codex records that the intelligence was received. The Codex also records that the intelligence was not acted upon. The Codex does not offer any explanation for this inaction. The Codex only records the fact. The Codex also records that the Watcher Network continued to operate throughout the war. The network's records from 1945 include a final report on the collapse of the Nazi regime. The report states that the network's assets in Germany were secured by Allied forces. The report also states that the network's personnel were debriefed by British intelligence. The report was filed on May 8, 1945. The report is signed with a single initial, a C. The Codex's description of the network's survival into the present day is supported by the architectural blueprints from the Austrian Engineering Museum. The blueprints show underground structures built in 1873 that match the Codex's description of the network's vaults. The blueprints also show additions dated 2004. The additions include a new entrance, a climate control system, and a reinforced door that meets modern security standards. The blueprints are not classified. They are stored in the museum's archive, accessible to any researcher who requests them. The museum's staff do not know what the structures were used for. The blueprints list the purpose as non-specified. The museum's catalog notes that the structures were originally built by a private foundation. The foundation's name is not recorded. The museum's catalog also notes that the structures were transferred to the foundation's successor organization in 1947. The successor organization's name is also not recorded. The blueprints themselves are the only evidence that the structures exist. The structures themselves have never been inspected by any government agency. The museum's director has stated in interviews that the structures are not open to the public. The director has also stated that he does not know what is inside them. The Codex's description of the vaults is consistent with the blueprints. The Codex states that the vaults contain records of the Watcher Network's activities from 1785 to the present. The Codex also states that the vaults contain the network's current operational plans. The Codex does not say what those plans are. The Codex only says that the plans are sealed. The Codex also says that the plans will be opened on a specific date. The Codex does not give the date. The Codex only says that the date is determined by the Council. The Codex's final pages describe the network structure in the 21st century. The network's hierarchy is unchanged. The Council still has 13 members. The Guardians still oversee geographic regions. The Watchers still operate in local cells of 7. The network's funding is still managed by the same Swiss bank. The trust's holdings are now estimated at billions of dollars. The network's assets include real estate in every major capital. The network's personnel include thousands of initiates. The Codex states that the network has infiltrated every major intelligence agency in the world. The Codex also states that the network has representatives in every major corporation. The Codex does not provide names. The Codex only states that the network's representatives are indistinguishable from their colleagues. They never reveal themselves. They never communicate their purpose. They simply observe and report. The Codex states that the network's current focus is on the convergence. The Codex describes the convergence as the moment when the Watcher network's purpose will be fulfilled. The Codex does not describe what the fulfillment looks like. The Codex only says that the fulfillment will be recognized by those who are ready to recognize it. The Codex also says that the fulfillment will be invisible to everyone else. The Codex ends with a passage that is written in the cipher. The passage has been translated 3 times. The 3 translations are identical. The passage reads, "The Watchers watch. The Watchers wait. The Watchers record. The Watchers do not intervene. The Watchers do not choose. The Watchers only observe. The observation is the purpose. The purpose is the observation." The Codex ends there. The blank section remains blank.